Thank you both very much indeed. Thank you. Now coming up on the programme, as mourners remember the life of Paul Quinn 1 month after his brutal killing, was he the victim of paramilitary violence in South Armagh? Before that, though, over 330 points against the euro, the pound was up. Against the dollar, the pound was also up. A public meeting in South Armagh tonight heard calls for the IRA to be disbanded. You'd be forgiven for thinking that might have happened already, but as the Sinn Féin President Gerry Adams reminded everyone not so long ago, they haven't gone away, you know. The South Armagh meeting was outraged by what became of Paul Quinn, a 21-year-old beaten to death. Sinn Féin say he was killed as part of a criminal feud, but Newsnight has been told that severe beatings of young men are getting worse. Politicians are accused of looking the other way in the interests of trying to keep the peace. Liz McKean reports.
In the border village of Cullehanna, friends and family of Paul Quinn gather for a service of remembrance. Up to 600 people pack into the church in a show of support for the family as they vow to see his killers brought to justice. A month has passed since the 21-year-old was beaten to death. No one's been arrested or charged, but the identity of those responsible is hotly disputed.
Only the IRA that I know of could do that sort of an act around here.
I've spoken to the IRA in this area and I am satisfied with the assurances that they give me, very solid assurances that they weren't involved in his death.
I believe that the reason that that young lad, Paul Quinn, was murdered by those men is simply because they knew that they would get away with it, and they're right.
Paul Quinn was murdered in this isolated barn just over the border in the Republic of Ireland. Almost immediately, the political establishment put his death down to a criminal feud. But his family don't accept that. They say his only crime was to fall out with local members of the IRA. On October the 20th, Paul Quinn got a phone call from friends. They offered him work to clear out a barn. He made the short journey but realised too late that it was a trap. A masked gang had taken the friends hostage and forced them to make the call. They could only listen as he was beaten with iron bars.
I'm led to believe local members of the IRA and people connected with them who felt that their authority had been challenged by him and decided that they would reimpose that authority. Indeed, the hostages that were held to lure him to the scene have reported that when he was being beaten, they were saying, "We are the bosses around here," which I think is an indication, more than anything, that they believe they are still the power in the land, not the police service of Northern Ireland.
Just before his death, Paul had moved back in with his parents in Cullehanna. They say he was worried about his safety after he'd got into fights with local men, who the family say have IRA connections. They believe that sealed his fate.
The head mustn't be right or something wrong. They're pure savages. That's the battery.
No doubt in your mind, it's people connected to the IRA.
Yes, I swear to the last that it's people connected to the IRA. No other ones could.
South Armagh was one of the bloodiest battlegrounds of the conflict in Northern Ireland. The IRA enjoyed local support among those nationalists who saw them as their defenders. A hated symbol were the army observation posts, now dismantled as part of the peace process. With the watchtowers all gone from the hills, South Armagh looks like a very different place these days. But I'm told by some of the people living here, people too afraid to speak openly, that one thing remains constant, and that is the iron grip of the IRA. We were told that severe beatings are not uncommon despite the IRA ceasefire. In fact, they're getting worse. One man, speaking anonymously, told us he knew of a dozen assaults carried out by Republicans.
The attitude has definitely changed. It's gone from patriotic ideals to Stalinist ideals and mafioso and Pol Pot.
And people are too afraid to speak up.
People are afraid to speak up. They've seen the outcome of what happens to people. Young people at discos and everything like that have no freedom or no liberty. these military families that have grown up since the trouble here, they seem to want to hold authority over everybody, and that's it.
We could get sued over that, but I'll worry about that.
Friends of the Quinn family have started a support group to bring those responsible for his killing to justice. One, a former Sinn Féin member who left the party over its decision to support the police service, says many feel they should have spoken out far sooner. What is happening in a place where young people are beaten to death or within an inch of their lives in a lot of cases because they won't do what they're told?
Well, see, the tragedy there is that this has been going on for a number of years, and for various reasons people haven't spoken out. I've said publicly myself that I feel an element of shame for not speaking out in the past when certain incidents took place, and other people, in particular parents, have told me the same, that they feel partly to blame for Paul's death because we didn't speak up sooner and say stop.
Like most border areas, South Armagh is home to large smuggling operations. The Organised Crime Task Force reports that in 2005, nearly half of all diesel used in Northern Ireland had entered the country illegally. The area's Sinn Féin MP says that despite reports to the contrary, the IRA has nothing to do with these rackets, and it is criminals, not Republicans, who killed Paul Quinn. Do you have evidence of that?
No, but what we have, we know what's going on in this area. We know some of the people that are involved in this area. When someone is taken and very brutally beaten to death, as Paul Quinn was, when people allege it was the IRA, and I go and talk to the IRA and receive assurances from them, as I expected to do, that it was not them involved, then you have to assume that it's other people who are involved in this area.
Isn't it up to the police to decide whether the IRA was involved?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, I think the community will want a sense of who was involved and who wasn't.
And you're entirely confident that Republicans were not responsible in any way for what happened to Paul Quinn, or any of the other beatings that have happened around here?
Yes, I am entirely comfortable with that, yes.
There were many features of Paul's killing which the family's supporters say point to the IRA. Its planning, the taking of hostages, and the large number of people involved, and then the ability to get clean away. 3 years ago, there was a series of armed raids across Belfast, all blamed on the IRA. Then just before Christmas, the biggest one of all. A large gang emptied the vaults of the Northern Bank. They carried off about £26 million. They and the money remain at large. Then a few weeks later, just along the road from the bank, Robert McCartney, a young father of two, was drinking here at McGuinness's bar. He got into an argument with local Sinn Féin and IRA members. As a result, he was chased onto the street and murdered. After his death, Robert McCartney's name and photograph were published all over the world as his sisters spoke out against his killers. In a new book, one of them describes the long campaign for justice. It's left them disillusioned.
Have we made a difference? Some people say we have, but then a man is taken to a shed and beaten to death, and again, no one is brought forward to do it anyway. I don't know if we made a difference or not. We'll just keep fighting. I think we broke a silence. There was an opportunity, I believe, when Robert was murdered, that governments could have seen, if they had have done the right thing, that subsequent murders might not have happened.
For all the divisions that surround controversial killings in Northern Ireland, there's been an unusual political consensus about Paul Quinn's murder.
There's no Republican involvement whatsoever in this man's murder.
First, Jerry Adams, Sinn Féin's president, said criminal gangs linked to smuggling were behind it. The Irish Premier Bertie Ahern also laid the blame on criminals, and the Northern Ireland Secretary Sean Woodward joined the chorus. The IMC, the body set up to monitor paramilitary ceasefires, evidently sees things differently, linking the killing to Republicans.
We do believe that those who were involved in the attack on him in his brutal murder included people who are members or former members or have associations with members or former members of the Provisional IRA.
I'm told the IMC still believe that Republicans killed Paul Quinn. In their next report, they'll try to establish who inside the IRA ordered his beating. The more senior the command, the greater the political consequences. But I'm also told it's considered highly unlikely that the order came from the very top. Even so, the fact the IRA retains a command structure and therefore the ability to carry out operations is something political opponents will not let Sinn Féin forget. But the party is adamant that while the IRA lives on, it is committed to the rule of law. Why are the IRA even still ongoing as an organisation for you to approach individual members?
Because the IRA, they stood down all of their activities and their volunteers. They still exist as an organisation, and I believe any organisation in transition from where the IRA had been, in this area in particular, I suppose 5-10 years ago, to where they are now, requires a managed transition.
The once hardline parties that share power at Stormont are enjoying a period of stability, led by old enemies who've been nicknamed the Chuckle Brothers. Even so, Ian Paisley's party say they'll deal firmly with their new colleagues if necessary.
We have to listen to the police because they are investigating the crime. To date, there have been no arrests. We want to know why that is the case. We want to see the perpetrators brought to justice, and if there are political implications, we will not shy away from them.
But in the past, the DUP has never shied away from roundly condemning Sinn Féin or Republicans at the slightest hint that there may be Republican involvement in a crime.
And we have condemned this murder, and we've condemned any Republican involvement in it. There is no question about us turning a blind eye to this.
But that is exactly what political leaders are being accused of. Rural Armagh, we're told, is a place where a sizable number of people live in fear, and they feel overlooked.
The worry, I think, for a lot of us in the community is that the politicians, or the two governments actually, are so keen, as we all are of course, to see the political process proceed and succeed, that they will condone anything in local communities in order to make that happen. They will not try to see any disruption to that process if that means ignoring such an atrocity as this.
Condoning murder?
Well, I hope not.
Paul Quinn's murder is being investigated by Irish police who say they're keeping an open mind. If IRA members are found to have been responsible, there will be political consequences. But that doesn't concern the Quinn family. They say they've never been interested in politics. All they want is justice.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Northern Ireland Secretary, Sean Woodward, at the Northern Ireland office. I began by asking him if the IRA was responsible for Paul Quinn's murder.
At the moment, there is an ongoing police investigation, so it would be foolish, I think, for anyone to speculate in any area as to who was specifically responsible for this. What I do know in my conversations both with the Chief Constable and with the Justice Minister in the Republic is that there is absolutely no evidence to believe in any shape or form that this was authorised by the leadership.
So you're asking us to believe there is a criminal gang operating in that part of Northern Ireland, part of the United Kingdom, which is so strong it can deploy sufficient people to take hostages, to secure an area, and then carry out a mass beating to death of an individual. A criminal gang with no connections to any paramilitary organisation.
And what I'm asking you to believe is that there is a police investigation going on now which is trying to establish who was responsible for this. And I think, as every responsible politician has said across the board on this, the right thing to do is to let the police carry out their investigation so those responsible end up where they belong, which is behind bars.
In that case, how can you assert there was no IRA connection?
You asked me a direct question, and I responded to you by telling you that in my inquiries to the PSNI and to the Justice Minister in the Republic, what they have said to me in response to some of the conjecture that's been in the press, some of the speculation that undoubtedly is flowing around, that there is no evidence whatsoever to believe that this was in any shape or form authorised.
Yet.
I can't say to you, Jeremy, whether it's yet or never. What I can tell you is that in the conversations we've had, and of course I'm aware of what people are saying, what I do know, and this is I think really important, is that there is a level of cooperation developing across Northern Ireland by the public with the police, which is dramatically different from what we've seen historically.
The suggestion is, of course, that you're so keen to see the climate change in Northern Ireland that you willfully ignore paramilitary connections.
That's totally untrue. What I'm most keen to see is that actually the people responsible for this young man's murder are put away.
How is it acceptable for elected representatives, indeed people with ministerial responsibility in the local government there, to be going to the IRA and coming back with assurances that the IRA wasn't involved, and for those to be taken seriously. This is an illegal organisation.
Well, first of all, everybody in this government in Northern Ireland has taken a pledge of office, and I think one should look carefully at the pledge they've taken. There is no assertion here whatsoever that those in office are in any shape or form connected with the murder of this young man.
No, but they can trot off and talk to an illegal organisation and apparently accept at face value an assurance it wasn't involved.
Well, I can't tell you whether anyone has trotted off and talked to any illegal organisation.
Conor Murphy trotted off.
What I can tell you is there has been outright condemnation by the leadership of Sinn Féin in this murder. Secondly, and a huge difference historically, and if we look back at the McCartney murder, I think you can see the very big difference here. It's been perfectly clear that they've said again and again that anybody who knows anything should go to the police and give evidence to the police. Their condemnation of this murder is as strong as anybody else's.
And you believe it?
Of course I do. Of course I do. I believe absolutely in everything that the IMC have said about the IRA and about Sinn Féin. These are people who are totally committed to the new peaceful political process in Northern Ireland. And I think, as Lord Alderdice said, to speculate mischievously would be wrong.
You quote Lord Alderdice. Let me quote to you John Grieve. We do believe those who are involved in the attack on him, Paul Quinn, in his brutal murder, included people who are members or former members or have associations with members or former members of the Provisional IRA.
Absolutely, and Lord Alderdice is part of the IMC. And when Lord Alderdice said we have to be very careful about speculation, I think he's right. However, that's the problem with speculation. Yeah. Once somebody puts one thing into the arena, it invites somebody else to return the comment. And
if it turns out the IRA was involved, would you reimpose direct rule?
Well, what you have to wait for here is a police investigation to be concluded. And adding to that speculation now won't assist in the investigation of Paul Quinn. I'm not asking you to
speculate about the police investigation. I'm saying if the police investigation concludes there was IRA involvement in this, will you reimpose direct rule?
I can't give you an answer to that question until the police have been able to do their job. And what I won't do is now add fuel to the speculation that's taking place. Because at the end of the day, what matters right now in this specific case is actually letting witnesses come forward so we can actually catch the people that did this dreadful crime and put them away where they belong.
Sean Woodward, thank you.
Thank you.
Quick gander at tomorrow morning's front pages. Almost all of them lead on the continuing Labour loan scandal. The Telegraph, the Independent, the Guardian, the Daily Mail.